The cardiologist's face told me everything before he opened his mouth. "Mr. Calloway," he started. "Frank," I said. "Old habit. 38 years of teaching high school English, and I still couldn't stand unnecessary formality. Frank." He set down the clipboard. "The bypass went well. You're going to need 8 to 10 weeks of recovery. No stairs, no driving. Someone needs to be with you the first month, at minimum." I nodded. I already knew what that meant. I already knew who I was going to call. What I didn't know yet was what they were going to say. My son Todd had been living in the house I'd bought him for 6 years. Not the house I helped him with. Not the house we split the down payment on. The house I bought him outright. 4 bedrooms in Tucson, $340,000, back when that still meant something. His wife Pamela had picked it out, walked through it once, and declared it acceptable. I remember thinking that was a strange word to use about a gift. That was the beginning of a pattern I was too stubborn, or too hopeful to recognize. For 5 years before the surgery, I had been sending them $4,800 a month. It started the way these things always start, a temporary thing, a bridge loan, a short-term fix. Todd had lost his job in logistics, Pamela was pregnant with my granddaughter Emma, and I had the money. My late wife Dorothy had left a sizable life insurance policy, and I'd been careful with it. I told myself I was being a good father. That's the story I told myself. By the time Emma was 4 years old, the $4,800 had become just another line item in their budget, like the mortgage they didn't have because the house was paid off. Like the SUV I'd co-signed on. They'd stop saying thank you somewhere around year 2. By year 4, if the transfer was even a day late, Pamela would text, "Everything okay? We're counting on that." Not a question. A reminder. I'm 63 years old. I taught literature for almost 4 decades. I know a bad story arc when I see one. I just didn't want to admit I was living inside one. Then my heart decided to make the decision for me. I called Todd from the hospital room. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. A double bypass, not an emergency, but not something to postpone either. My neighbor Clifford had driven me in when the chest pain started, sat with me through the initial testing, and was asleep in the chair by the window when I picked up the phone. Todd answered on the 4th ring. "Dad, it's late." "I know. I'm at St. Luke's." "They found a blockage. Surgery tomorrow morning." Silence. Then, how serious? Serious enough that they want to do it tomorrow. Another silence. Longer this time. I heard Pamela's voice in the background, the low murmur of her asking who it was. "Dad, the thing is." Todd exhaled. "Emma's spring recital is this weekend. Pamela's been planning this whole thing around it. Her parents are flying in, we have dinner reservations, the whole Todd. I know. But it's not like you said it's an emergency, right? You said it went okay? The surgery is tomorrow morning. Right. But the recovery, that's weeks, right? So we could come out after the recital, maybe the following week." I stopped listening. Not because I hung up, because something shifted inside me, in a way that had nothing to do with the blockage in my left anterior descending artery. Something I'd been holding together for years, just quietly let go. "That works," I said. "Come when you can." I hung up. Clifford was watching me from the chair. He's 71, hard of hearing, and one of the most perceptive people I've ever known. He didn't say anything. He just reached over and turned off the lamp, like he understood I didn't need to see my own face right then. The surgery went fine. I woke up with tubes in places I'd rather not describe. A nurse named Patricia checking my vitals with the efficiency of someone who'd seen 10,000 people wake up from exactly this. And a deep, bone-level exhaustion that felt like being pressed into the mattress from the inside. Clifford was in the waiting room. My former student and now friend Denise had driven over when she heard. My daughter-in-law Pamela had sent a text, "Glad it went well." Todd says he'll call later. Todd did call, that evening, for 9 minutes. He asked if I needed anything. I said I had people helping. He said that was good, and then he mentioned that Emma had crushed her recital and Pamela's parents had loved the restaurant. He seemed to want me to say something congratulatory. I said I was glad. He said he'd try to come out the following week if things settled down. They did not come the following week. 3 weeks into my recovery, I was managing the stairs on my own, which I was not supposed to be doing. Denise was stopping by twice a week. Clifford came every other day, sat on my back porch with me, and we'd go through the crossword together like we had for years. My cardiologist, Dr. Okafor, told me the recovery was going well, then looked at my notes and asked about my support system at home. I told him a neighbor had been helping. He wrote something down and didn't say anything else. Todd came at the 5-week mark. He and Pamela drove up on a Saturday, stayed for 4 hours, and Pamela spent most of it walking through the house, making observations disguised as questions. Have you thought about whether all this space makes sense for one person? And Emma would love this yard if she had more room to grow up in. Todd helped me replace a light fixture and let me make him a sandwich. And when they left, Pamela hugged me and said, "We really need to make this more of a regular thing." They meant visits. They had driven 4 hours for a 4-hour visit once, while I was recovering from open heart surgery. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat in the kitchen for a long time. That was when I called my attorney. Her name is Vivian Park, and she has the energy of someone who has heard every variety of human foolishness and remains genuinely interested in all of it. We'd worked together on Dorothy's estate. She knew the whole situation without me having to catch her up much. "I want to stop the monthly transfers," I said, "and I want to revise the will." She didn't ask if I was sure. That's what I liked about her. Timeline? Soon. And I want to do it quietly. I don't want them to know until it's done. Understood. What are you thinking for the estate? Everything to Emma. In trust, controlled by you until she's 25. Todd and Pamela get nothing beyond what they already have. Vivian made a note. The house in Tucson? You transferred that out, right? Years ago. That's theirs. I'm not touching that. All right. Give me 2 weeks. I also asked her something else. Something I'd been thinking about since the hospital room. If they ever tried to claim I was diminished, incompetent, what would that look like? Vivian's pen stopped moving. Is there a reason you're asking? They're going to lose $4,800 a month and a substantial inheritance. I want to be ready. She looked at me steadily. I'll document everything. Every conversation, every evaluation. When we're done, the paper trail on your competence will be thicker than their lawyer's briefcase. Good, I thought. Let them come. The transfers stopped on the 1st of the month. No explanation, no warning. I had thought about sending a message, writing something out. In the end, I decided the silence was its own message. If they didn't know what they'd done wrong, explaining it wasn't going to help. Pamela called 11 days later. "Frank, there must be some kind of error with the transfer. We haven't received anything this month, and we have obligations." "There's no error," I said. A pause. Then, carefully, "What do you mean?" "I mean I stopped sending it." The careful tone evaporated. "You stopped, without telling us. We have bills. We have Emma's school. You have a paid-off house and 2 working adults, Pamela. Todd's position isn't... I know what Todd's position is." I kept my voice level. "I've been supporting your household for 5 years. When I had open-heart surgery, you came for 4 hours at week 5. I've made some decisions about how I'm using my resources going forward." She said several things after that. None of them were particularly inventive. And I'd taught teenagers for 38 years, so my threshold for dramatic declarations is fairly high. When she finally stopped, I said, "I hope you both take good care of yourselves," and ended the call. My phone showed 41 missed calls over the next 72 hours. All Pamela. Todd called once, on the 2nd day, and when I answered, he was quiet for a moment, and then said, "Dad, she's really upset." "I imagine she is. This is going to cause real problems for us." "I understand. Is this? He stopped. Is this about the surgery? About us not coming? Todd, I think you already know the answer to that. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, I don't know what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything right now. I want you both to figure out how to live within your means. That's all. I hung up, sat with it. 41 calls. Now one of them asking how I was feeling. Emma called me that Friday. She's 9 years old and already has more emotional intelligence than either of her parents, which tells you something about nature and something about the limitations of nurture. She called from her tablet, her face filling the screen, her hair in 2 uneven braids she'd clearly done herself. Grandpa, are you mad at Mom and Dad? Why do you ask that? Because Mom keeps saying your name in a really specific voice. I smiled despite myself. I'm not mad. I made some decisions that your Mom and Dad aren't happy about. That's between us, not you. Are you okay? Like, from your heart surgery? I'm doing very well, actually. Dr. Okafor says I'm ahead of schedule. Good! She nodded seriously. Can I still come visit this summer? You can absolutely come visit this summer. Can we go to the Natural History Museum again? And get green chill aisle from that place? We can do both of those things. She smiled. Okay, Grandpa, I made a card for you when you were in the hospital, but Mom said you were resting and we shouldn't bother you. I had to look out the window for a moment. I would love to see that card whenever you want to send it. I'll take a picture of it. She did. I still have it on my refrigerator. Crayon drawing of a man in a hospital bed with a very large red heart visible through his chest, surrounded by what appeared to be balloons, or possibly planets. In her careful 9-year-old printing, "Get better, Grandpa. Your heart is good, even if it's broke." She'd meant broken. As in, damaged, but she wasn't wrong either way. Vivienne called me 8 weeks after the transfer stopped. They've retained an attorney. I'd expected it. What's the claim? They're alleging cognitive decline affecting your financial decision-making. They have a letter from a Dr. Tyne Harmon alleging signs of diminished capacity following cardiac surgery. I've never met a Dr. Harmon. Correct. The letter is dated 3 weeks ago. Dr. Harmon's office address is a co-working space in Phoenix. Of course it was. What's our response? I've already arranged a full neuropsychological evaluation with Dr. Patricia Osei at the University of Arizona. Board certified, 30 years of experience, testified as an expert witness in competency cases hundreds of times. We schedule it this week, have results within 10 days. And the fraudulent letter? Vivienne's tone changed in a way that almost sounded like enjoyment. I've referred the matter to the state medical board, and I'm filing a complaint with the county bar regarding the attorney who submitted it. I've also put together a documentation package, your financial records for the past decade, evidence of consistent and rational decision-making, correspondence, everything. If they want a competency hearing, we'll be extremely ready for a competency hearing. I thought about my 38 years in front of a classroom. The number of students who tried to hand me work that wasn't theirs and assumed I wouldn't notice. Schedule the evaluation, I said, and Vivienne. I want to file for legal cost recovery. Whatever this process costs me, I want them responsible for it. Already drafted. The hearing was on a Thursday morning in November. Tucson in November is the best version of itself. The brutal heat finally broken. The sky doing that particular thing it does in the desert, where the light looks borrowed from somewhere better. I wore a jacket Dorothy had bought me years ago, charcoal gray, the kind of thing she said made me look like I knew something. The judge, the Honorable Sandra Reeves, who had the expression of someone who had seen this exact situation in various costumes many times before, reviewed the documentation, looked at the neuropsychological report, and then looked at Todd and Pamela's attorney. Counsel, I've read the petitioner's submission and the respondent's evaluation. I'd like to address a few things directly. She turned to Todd and Pamela. Pamela was in a blazer I didn't recognize. Expensive, new. Todd was looking at his hands, Is it your contention that your father's decision to cease financial support represents evidence of cognitive impairment? Their attorney started to speak. The judge waved him down. I'm asking your clients. Pamela straightened. Your Honor, the timing, immediately following major surgery, suggests he wasn't in his right, Mr. Calloway, the judge said, turning to me. Can you explain the reasoning behind your decision to cease the transfers? I could have given a short answer. I gave the complete one. I told her about the 5 years, the $4,800 a month, the house, the vehicle, the cosigns. I told her about the phone call from the hospital room, the recital that was more important, the 4-hour visit at week 5. I told her about the 41 missed calls, every one of them about money, not one about my health. I told her about Emma's card that I still had on my refrigerator. The courtroom was very quiet when I finished. The judge looked at Pamela. You submitted a letter from a physician who has never examined or met your father-in-law. Our attorney advised. Your attorney submitted a fraudulent medical document to this court. Her voice was calm in the way that courtroom air conditioning is calm, technically comfortable, not at all warm. That is a serious matter, and it will be addressed separately. As to your petition, denied. Mr. Calloway is demonstrably competent. Furthermore, I'm ordering the petitioners to cover the respondent's legal expenses in full. Miss Park, what's the total? $14,200, Your Honor. Payable within 45 days. The gavel came down. We're adjourned. Their attorney was already gathering his papers with the efficiency of someone who couldn't leave fast enough. Todd and Pamela were talking in low, urgent voices. As I walked past with Vivian, I heard Pamela say something sharp. Heard Todd say, I told you this wasn't going to work, and then I was through the door and out into the November light, and I didn't need to hear any more. Vivian walked me to Clifford's car. Clean sweep, she said. What happens if they don't pay? Then we begin collection proceedings, liens, garnishment, the full menu. She paused. Do they have $14,200? Between the legal fees they already owe their own attorney and the credit cards Pamela's been running up? I thought about it. No, I don't think they do. Vivian smiled in a way that was purely professional. Then this is going to be educational for them. On the drive home, my phone buzzed continuously in my jacket pocket. I didn't look at it until we pulled into my driveway. 37 missed calls. All Pamela. Not one from Todd. The weeks after the hearing were quieter than I expected. No calls, no visits. Just the particular silence of people who've run out of moves and haven't yet accepted it. Clifford and I kept up our crossword routine. Dr. Okafor signed off on my full recovery. I started walking 3 miles a morning, which Dorothy would have been insufferably pleased about. She'd been trying to get me to walk regularly for the last decade of her life. Grief does strange things. Sometimes the person is gone, and you finally start doing the things they asked you to do. Emma sent me a voice message, Grandpa. It's me. Mom says we're not coming for Thanksgiving, but I just want you to know I still want to come visit. And I didn't forget about the museum and the green chili place. I love you. Bye. Then, after a pause, it's Emma. As though I might not have recognized her, I listened to it 3 times. Through Vivian, I learned that Todd and Pamela had defaulted on their portion of the legal costs. Their own attorney had filed to withdraw from representation. They'd taken out a personal loan, run additional balances on 2 cards, and according to a mutual acquaintance, Pamela had been telling people I had abandoned the family. Todd had started picking up freelance consulting work on evenings and weekends. I found that last part genuinely encouraging, in a way I hadn't expected. Denise came over for dinner one evening in December, and we talked about it. The way old friends can talk about hard things without it becoming a performance. Do you think he gets it? She asked. Todd. I think he's starting to. I poured the wine. Pamela is running the narrative right now, but he's working evenings. That's not something he was doing 6 months ago. Something is shifting. And if it isn't? I thought about the will. Emma's trust, the clarity of what I'd built, and what I'd decided. then I have my answer about who he's chosen to be. Either way, I know where I stand." She was quiet for a moment. "Dorothy would be proud of you. Dorothy would have sorted this out 10 years ago, and everyone would have thanked her for it." Denise laughed. She wasn't wrong. Todd called on a Sunday in January. No Pamela on the line. I could tell from the background sounds the particular quiet of an empty house or a parked car. "Can we meet somewhere?" he said. "Just us." We met at a diner I used to take him to when he was a teenager. He was there before me, sitting in the same booth we always used to get, looking at the menu he'd had memorized for 30 years. When he looked up, I saw it. The shift that I'd been watching for and hadn't let myself believe in. Something stripped back, like expensive paint, finally worn off to show what's underneath. He looked like his mother, in that moment. She'd had that same look when she was about to say something true. "I'm not going to ask you to restore the transfers," he said, before I could sit down fully, or change anything with a will. "I'm not here for that." "Okay. Pamela's. We're having problems. Real ones." He turned the coffee cup in his hands. "She's been telling everyone that you've lost your mind, that you're being manipulated, that Vivienne is taking advantage of you, and He stopped, set down the cup. I stopped being able to say it out loud, because I don't believe it. I waited. I believed it for a little while, because it was easier than the other thing. He met my eyes. The other thing being that we spent 5 years taking money from my father, and when he needed us, we sent a text saying we were glad the surgery went okay. "Todd, no, let me." He pressed his hand flat on the table. "I know why we didn't come. I know exactly why, because Pamela said it wasn't an emergency, and I let her define what an emergency was. Because I've been letting Pamela define a lot of things for a long time. And I'm not," he shook his head. "I'm not blaming her. I made choices. I let things happen. I valued the wrong things for a long time." The diner was quiet in the way that Sunday morning diners are quiet. The particular piece of people who got up early for the good seats and have nowhere to be. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I've been in therapy since October." He said it plainly, no performance around it. "Working through a lot of things. The financial stuff. What it means that I let us get to this place." He paused. "Pamela won't go. Says there's nothing wrong with her." "No, I don't imagine she would. She might leave." He said it steadily, in a way that told me he'd sat with it long enough to stop flinching. "If things don't go back to the way they were, she'll probably leave." "How do you feel about that?" He thought about it, like it's been coming for longer than I want to admit. He looked up. "Dad, I'm not going to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it right now. I just wanted to tell you that I understand. What you did, why you did it, all of it, you were right. The coffee was bad, the way diner coffee always is. Burnt at the edges, too thin in the middle, and completely right for that particular kind of conversation." "You're going to be all right," I said. "Not quickly, but you will be." "How do you know?" "Because you're in therapy, and you paid for it yourself, and you're sitting here having a conversation you didn't have to have." I wrapped my hands around my mug. "That's more than I expected 2 months ago." He nodded. "Then, Emma misses you. She talks about you constantly." "I know, we talk every week. She showed me the painting she did for your refrigerator." He almost smiled. "She's been asking if she can come stay with you for part of the summer." "She can come any time she wants." Even if Pamela and I aren't in a good place?" I looked at my son, 63 years old, 2 replaced valves and a repaired artery. And I still recognized in him the 7-year-old who used to bring me books he'd found in the library and wanted to discuss them immediately, who'd had a sense of wonder before the world got a hold of him and taught him to be careful instead. "Emma is my granddaughter," I said. "That doesn't change based on whatever is happening between her parents. And you are my son. That doesn't change either." What changes is the terms. The terms. I'm not a resource, Todd. I'm your father. Those are different things, and it took me longer than it should have to stop letting you confuse them. I kept my voice even. I'm willing to have you in my life. On those terms, as people who show up for each other, not as a funding mechanism. He nodded slowly. That's fair. It's more than fair. It's what we should have had all along. We sat there for another hour. Didn't solve anything. There wasn't anything to solve that morning. Not really. Some things take months, and some take years, and some things you just carry alongside you and learn to make room for. We talked about Emma, about his work, about the freelance projects he'd picked up. He asked about my walking routine, and I told him about the trail along the wash I'd discovered. The way the light comes through the saguaros in the early morning when nobody else is out there. He said, I forgot you used to walk. Mom was always trying to get you to walk. I know. Took a heart attack to get me started. He laughed. Real laugh, not the polished version. And for a moment, I saw him clearly, not the man he'd been letting himself be, but the man he might get back to being, given time and some hard-won reckoning. When we got up to leave, he hesitated at the door. Dad, I'm sorry. Not for a specific thing. Not a strategy or negotiation. Just those two words, offered plainly. I know you are, I said. Show me. The Tucson winter turned slowly toward spring. Emma came for spring break, and we went to the Natural History Museum twice, because once wasn't enough. We found a new green chili place because the old one had closed, and after some deliberation, she ruled the new one acceptable. Better than acceptable, eventually. Pamela filed for divorce in March. Todd called to tell me, his voice careful and steady in a way that meant he'd been braced for it. He had a small apartment now, tidy from what Emma described, with a shelf where he'd started collecting paperbacks again, the way he used to before everything got expensive and then easier, before he'd let himself stop wanting things that didn't cost money. Emma showed me a photo of the shelf on her tablet. I recognized a few of the titles. Books I'd taught, books I'd put in his hands 30 years ago. I didn't say anything about it. Some things you just note quietly and carry with you. Vivienne sent me a final accounting. Between the legal costs they'd been ordered to pay and their own attorney's fees, Todd and Pamela had spent close to $31,000 on the competency filing. The house in Tucson would go into the divorce proceedings. Depending on how that resolved, Todd might walk away with enough to start clean, or he might not. Either way, it was his to figure out. That was the whole point. Clifford came over one evening in April, and we sat on the back porch with iced tea because it was already almost too warm for anything else. The desert in spring is a specific kind of beautiful, everything that survived the winter looking slightly surprised at itself, the Palo Verde trees going completely irrational with yellow blossoms. How are you doing? Clifford asked. The way he asks it when he actually wants to know. I thought about it honestly. I'm good. Better than I've been in a while. Todd? He came for dinner last Sunday. Brought Emma. We grilled. Clifford looked out at the yard. And Pamela? Hasn't called since the divorce filing. I imagine she's realized there's nothing left to call about. He nodded. Sipped his tea. You know what I keep thinking about? I said. Is the timing of all of it. If I hadn't had the surgery, I probably would have kept sending the money, would have kept telling myself it was the right thing, that they needed it, that it was what Dorothy would have wanted. I paused. Dorothy would not have wanted it. I knew that. I just needed a reason to stop pretending I didn't. Sometimes you need something to shake things loose, Clifford said. I had open-heart surgery to get there. I'd recommend a cheaper method. He laughed. Fair enough. Emma came out through the sliding door with her tablet, wanting to show us both a video about a species of octopus she'd been researching, which led to 45 minutes of octopus facts, and eventually into a discussion about intelligence and what it means that creatures so different from us can problem solve. And I thought, this is the thing. This is what the money was eating. Not just mine. Theirs, too. All of it going into a lifestyle that looked like something but felt like nothing. while meanwhile, a 9-year-old was drawing hearts in crayon and learning about octopi, and calling to check on her grandfather from a house where the adults were busy being disappointed. Not anymore. Later, after Emma and Todd had left and Clifford had gone home and the yard was quiet, I stood in the kitchen for a while, looking at the crayon drawing on the refrigerator. Your heart is good, even if it's broke. She'd been right. It had been broken. Not just physically, and it had been repaired. Also not just physically. I'm 63 years old. Retired teacher. Widower. Man with 2 new valves and a better grasp than I used to have on what I'm worth, and what I'm not willing to trade it for. I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. For the first time in a long time, I slept without worrying about any of it. I spent 38 years teaching other people's children how to read carefully, how to look at a text and ask, what is this actually saying underneath the surface? What does this character's choice reveal about who they really are? It took me until 63 to apply that same reading to my own life. Here's what I know now. What happened with Todd and Pamela wasn't a surprise that came out of nowhere. It was the ending of a story I'd been writing for years, one bad chapter at a time. I gave them a house. I signed for a car. I sent $4,800 every month without conditions, without conversation, without ever asking what we were actually building toward. I told myself it was love. It was, partly. But it was also avoidance. It was easier to write a check than to have the harder conversation about what I needed, what I expected, what I was worth to them, beyond the transfer confirmation email. When I called Todd from that hospital room, and he told me Emma's recital was more important, I want to be honest about this. Part of me wasn't surprised. I trained him, without meaning to see me as a reliable source of support that didn't require much maintenance. I'd made it easy to take me for granted. That's not blame. That's just cause and effect, played out over years in ways I kept choosing not to see. The 41 missed calls after I stopped the transfers told me everything I needed to know. Not one of them asked how my recovery was going. Not one of them asked if I was eating, if I was sleeping, if the scar was healing. They were about the money. Only ever about the money. And when you strip everything else away, and that's what's left, you have your answer about what you've actually been funding all along. What I keep coming back to, though, is Emma. 9 years old, doing her own braids, calling to ask if I was okay. Drawing a heart in crayon and writing that mine was good even if it was broke. She was right. The organ healed. The other thing, the part of me that had quietly accepted being treated like a resource instead of a father, that took longer. That required a decision. Decisions are where character actually lives. Not in the easy moments, not when everything is fine. In the moments when it costs you something to do the right thing, that's when you find out what you're actually made of. Todd is finding that out now. The work he's putting in, the therapy, the freelance projects, the shelf of paperbacks he's rebuilding. That's a man trying to locate himself again after a long time of letting someone else define the terms of his life. I recognize it because I had to do the same thing. Intelligence isn't just knowing facts. It's the willingness to look honestly at what your choices have produced and to change course when the evidence is clear. Resilience isn't the absence of collapse. It's what you do after. And integrity. That's the quiet daily work of making sure your actions match what you actually believe, even when no one is keeping score. I'm not a cautionary tale. I'm a man who stopped being a doormat and started being a father again. Those two things, it turns out, are not mutually exclusive. Emma's coming for the summer. We have a museum to get back to.